all the gist that you need to hear about cloud computing. So good morning, everyone. It's good. I've seen your introductions. We have people from all across joining us today, and it's always a joy and a delight. Good morning. And we also have our super amazing facilitators who are going to, come on board at some point today to also guide you. So as you know, this bootcamp is to introduce you into the world of cloud computing. Some of you have been following Cloud Booster for many years, and you're like, what are these guys doing? Why do I need to get involved and all of that? And some of you were probably a part of our webinar, and you decided to, join us and to do this one-day bootcamp. So this is your taster into our world, right? Like we always say, everybody can do cloud computing, everybody can learn. We just need you to understand what it entails and give it what it takes, right? When you develop rare and valuable skills, that's how you position yourself to always be relevant in the market, even in this ever-changing world, right? Cloud computing is a part of technology that will still always relevant 20, 30, 40 years down the line, even with the rise of AI, right? Cloud is your foundation and it powers many technologies like AI, machine learning. So you are in the right place. So how many of you have actually joined some of our webinars? Let me know. Has anybody here joined any of our webinars? Just give me a 1 in the chat box if you've been a part of any of our webinar sessions, or if this is your first interaction with us, then you can give me a 2 in the chat box. Let me know. How many of you have joined our webinars previously? How many of you, this is your first time interacting with us? You can put a 2 in the chat box. Okay, I can see 1 person. So these sessions are going to be interactive, so I want to be hearing your responses as we go along. Right. So how many of you have joined some of our webinars or interacted with us on some level before? And how many of you, this is your first time, complete first time of interacting with us? Let me see it. Okay, I've seen. Thank you, Tari. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Benjamin Adewusi. Anyone else? Let's see. There are over 20 people on this call, and we're getting to 3 responses. See, this is not one of those sessions that you just be doing something else in the background and then you're joining us. No, we want your full participation. Right. Okay, I can see 4 responses. We're still expecting more. So I'll be looking at the response and then I'll carry on with the lecture for today. So today we're introducing you to the world of cloud computing. I will teach some theoretical concepts. There are times that we'll have break sessions. We'll have break. Okay, I can see first time. Amazing. So I'll teach introduction into cloud computing. We'll take a quick break and then I'll teach the second module, and then I'll teach intro. You do a lab. We'll take a quick break. I'll teach the second module, and then you also have quiz sessions and you have lab sessions. So anyway, today is going to be a rich day filled with a mix of all these different activities, and we just want you to be engaged and be fully involved in everything. Can I get more responses? Is it just 5 people that are following us today? First time joining us, put 2 in the chat box. You've joined us before for one of our programs, put 1 in the chat box. Maybe I should start calling names. Tommy C, have I seen your response? We have Toyosi on the call. We have, let me see. We have Iboro, we have Ibrahim, we have Mahadi Adamu, we have Umbwa, we have Ungozi. Oh, sorry, Ungozi is one of your lecturers. So we have Olutayo, we have Belumi, we have Shekona, we have Sylvester. Okay, I think this calling is working. As I'm calling you guys are responding, that's good. It's good to know that we're actually. So please be engaged all through. Don't just sit back at the computer, at the back of the computer, and be like, what are they doing? No. We need you engaged, right? Because you're going to do lab sessions. You're going to build your own solutions on the cloud. And that's what today's session is about. So thank you for your responses. Let's get started. Oh, someone says they cannot hear me. I think other people can hear me. Please, if you cannot hear me, can you just try to see if you can rejoin the call, please? If you cannot hear me, please try and rejoin the call. Please try and rejoin the call. Please try and rejoin the call for having issues with hearing. I think most people can hear me considering the response. You can just quickly log off and log back in, please. Yeah, a number of hear me clearly. So I'll just recommend if you can quickly join the call again. All right, cool. So let's go straight into our very first lecture for today. So today I'm introducing you into cloud computing, right? And I'm just going to share my screen now. Can we see my screen, please? All right. So I'm introducing you to the world of cloud computing. So we're starting an introduction. What exactly is cloud computing about? So let's get started. So today I'll cover what is cloud computing, why do you need to learn cloud computing, why AWS, what is the AWS global infrastructure, right? What does the blueprint of AWS look like, and how do you choose your AWS region? Again, like I said, it's a taster. We will deep dive into all of these details in our main, program. But today, let's get started. So, what is cloud computing? Cloud computing is a technology that allows users to access computing resources. And when we say computing resources, we're talking about things like servers, like storage, like databases and applications over the internet on a pay-per-use basis without the need for physical hardware. Let's break that down. So what we're saying is that when we get into the world of cloud, we're saying that users can access things like servers, things like databases, things like applications over the internet. The world before cloud computing was that if you need a server, you need to go and buy a physical server. If you need a database, you need to go and buy a physical database, right? And once you've bought it, you're going to be incurring costs throughout the lifetime of that particular computing resource. But the world of cloud is like, you know what? Let's have all these things, servers, databases, let's have them owned by major cloud providers. And if anybody needs to use them, they just need to rent the resource that they need over the internet from all these global providers, and they pay for what they use. All of us are familiar with pay-as-you-go model, right? If you're trying to buy data in any part of the world, they'll say, do you want pay-as-you-go? Do you want to do a particular bundle? So the world of cloud computing introduces us into a world where organizations that require computing resources, they don't need to buy all those devices up front. They can actually rent what they need from a cloud provider, and it's so revolutionary. So if you look at this image on the right, you can see all the things that cloud computing can give. You can rent servers on the cloud. You can rent storage spaces on the cloud. You can rent mobile applications on the cloud. You can rent all sorts of web applications on the cloud. You can rent databases on the cloud, right? You can do all of that using the power of cloud computing. So you wouldn't need to use any physical hardware. And everybody on the call, you all use cloud daily. Whether you're logging into your Netflix account, or you're using iCloud, or you're using Gmail, or you're using Spotify, or you're using Google Drive, all of these are software, all of these are SaaS products that run on the cloud, right? Your phone has a limited storage, and they'll tell you that, oh, would you like to buy, by the time you've exhausted your iPhone storage, they'll tell, do you want to buy some storage? Do you want to buy storage from iCloud? So that now extends the capacity of your phone beyond the amount of gigs. So even if your phone is 256 gig, and you've exhausted all that space, you can subscribe to iCloud, and they'll tell you how many gig do you want to buy, and then you pay, for the number of gig that you're using. Netflix is a media company that runs fully on the cloud, right? Netflix does not own their own servers. What they've done is that as a business, they've gone to rent computing space from a global cloud provider, in their own case, AWS, right? And all of their resources run on a global cloud provider. So with that, you can know that individuals can access the cloud in the scenario of iCloud and Gmail. Organizations can access the cloud in the case of Netflix and Spotify. So Spotify also, they don't have their own servers. They run fully on a global cloud provider. So that is what the world of cloud computing is, and it's so revolutionary. So if you've ever wondered, how does Netflix manage over 220 million subscribers with millions of views in traffic daily, and it doesn't break? It's because they run on the cloud. If you have ever wondered, how Instagram runs, how Spotify runs, all of them leverage cloud computing. And life before cloud was that people were using, physical self-managed data centers, like I described earlier. So we have three major cloud providers globally. We have Microsoft Azure, we have Amazon Web Services, and we have cloud platform. Those three cloud providers are very, very popular, and they're the major cloud providers that we have globally. Now, we also, moving on, I want to talk about some of the advantages of cloud computing. Actually, at this point, I always like to ask people, so can someone tell me, based on what I've described, what do you think are some of the advantages of the cloud? Based on just the analogies I've given about how you use the cloud and how organizations use the cloud, what do you guys think? What are some of the advantages of the cloud? based on what I've described. What do you guys think? Can someone tell me, if organizations don't need to own their own physical data centers and they can rent it from from somewhere else, what do you guys think are the advantages? Tell me, what do you think? For you as an individual, for an organization that is trying to leverage the cloud, you only pay for what you use. That's a very big advantage, because previously people had to pay whether they are using it or not. As long as you've bought a server, you have to pay for it. So that's very good. More, who else wants to give a try? What do you think are some of the benefits of the cloud? Increased scalability, very good, Tommy Singh. Because now, if Netflix, for example, if they currently have 100 million subscribers, and all of a sudden they move to 1 billion, maybe something happened and something went viral and 1 billion people want to access Netflix, that can easily run on the cloud, because they don't need to do anything. They just need to tell the cloud provider that they work with to add more resources to their portfolio. Meanwhile, if they were not on the cloud, they would need to go and start looking for how they're going to buy physical servers, so the scalability is amazing. Well done. Minimal downtime, exactly, because when you run on the cloud, you can leverage different regions, which I'll talk about shortly. You can actually have your data centers positioned in different parts of the world. If you are buying it yourself and your company is in China, you have to buy physical data centers and put it in China. But if you are running on the cloud, you can say, you know what, this cloud provider, give me data centers in Australia, give me Nigeria. And you don't need to buy anything. You're just programming it on the cloud provider. So there's minimum downtime, because you can have so if something should go wrong with the data center in Nigeria, the one in Australia can serve your customers, which is amazing. Easy access to data, absolutely. Because imagine, Google Drive is an example of cloud computing. Right? So if all you were limited to was the file stored on your laptop, what if you forget to carry your laptop and you're going somewhere? But because you have access, once you have access to the internet and you have your Google login details, anything that you have stored on your Google Drive, you can access it. So cloud actually gives you easy access to data. Well done, Sylvester. Access to more virtual storage beyond the physical storage. Absolutely. So true, Tari. More, reduce maintenance costs. Oh, absolutely. In fact, when you're leveraging cloud, the cloud, you do not need to even pay for maintenance, right? All of that is being covered by the cloud provider. The resources are endless. Oh, absolutely. You have access to, unlimited, vast amount of resources. Well done. I'm really impressed. You guys are you sure you need this bootcamp? Because you guys already know cloud. All right, let's go on. Well done. So you can see that some of the advantages you said are actually here already. So organizations migrating to the cloud, they can now trade capital expense for variable expense. So because you don't have to buy physical servers, not knowing, and then spending a lot of money. Instead, they can just pay for what they use, right? Which is variable expense. So if they don't use much, they don't pay much. If they use much, they pay much. And they can benefit from massive economies of scale. The more they use, the less they pay. The organizations can stop guessing about capacity. There's increase in speed and agility, right? And any company can go global in minutes. You come up with an idea right now, you can deploy it to any part of the world because of cloud computing. In addition, there's also efficiency and cost reduction. There's automatic software updates and integration, which is the maintenance that someone was talking about. There's scalability. There's unlimited storage capacity, just like one of you has said, and excellent disaster recovery. That's when somebody said minimal downtime. So all the advantages said are actually here already. Why do you need to learn cloud computing? The cloud computing market moved from $97 billion market in 2019 to $270 billion market in 2022, and is projected to reach $1,902 billion markets by 2030, which is in the next 5 years. So cloud is in the future. There's a need for more skilled professionals, and there are more jobs in the cloud space. That's why you need to learn. Why do we teach you AWS? Currently, AWS is the global biggest cloud provider, and it lays the foundation for you to learn and adapt to other cloud platforms, because it's easy to comprehend and its documentation is user-friendly. There are other ones. There's Microsoft Azure, there's Google Cloud, right? But we start with AWS, and once you learn AWS, you can learn the other ones. And even if you choose to start with Microsoft Azure or any other one, that's fine. But we always recommend that you start with just one cloud provider so you don't get confused, right? Once you understand it, you can move on to other ones. Now, let's look at the AWS global infrastructure. And this is where we begin to talk about how AWS is located, how AWS, AWS presence, right? So when we talk about AWS region, an AWS region is actually a geographical area in a country that AWS, that an AWS region is a geographical area within a country, right? So anywhere that AWS currently has a presence, that's what we refer to as a region. And even as much as I'm explaining all these concepts and I'm going to be referring to AWS a lot, I want you to know that all of these principles apply to other cloud providers as well, right? All of these principles apply to other cloud providers as well. So when we talk about the global infrastructure, let me show you. So that link that I just copied here, you can see this is the AWS global infrastructure, right? These are the places where AWS has a presence. So if you look at this map of the globe and you see all these dots, these are parts of the world that AWS currently has a presence in. AWS is currently not everywhere, but a region is a geographical area within the country. Look at Africa. You can see that AWS has a presence in Cape Town, South Africa, right? So, and of course, they're looking to go to other regions, but there are other continents that have more of their presence than others. And there are also other local cloud providers as well, but we're looking at AWS as a case study here. So in North America, you can see all the regions that exist. And when you create your AWS account in your lab today, you can easily go through, you can easily check all the different regions. So you can see within North America, AWS has a presence in Canada. They're there, right there in Canada, Canada Central. They have Canada West and all these places. And you can see in South America as well, those are the areas that they have in Europe. They have a lot of presence in Europe. You can see they have a presence in London, Milan, Paris, and all of that. And then you can see Middle East as well. So in Africa, you can see Cape Town, South Africa, so these are all geographical areas that AWS, they have a lot of presence in Asia, and in Australia they have a number of about 2, so Sydney and Melbourne. So AWS, when we talk about AWS region, we're talking about a geographical area, right, where AWS has a presence, a geographical area in the country where AWS has a presence. And at the moment, AWS actually has 38 regions globally. Now, within a region, we also have what we call availability zone. You would have seen it when I was clicking on all those things. So availability zones are isolated data centers located in specific regions. So this helps to ensure that cloud customers have stable connection to a cloud service in a geographical zone that is closest to them. Right, so this is also very important. So within South Africa, for example, we know that Cape Town is a part of Cape Town is a region of AWS. So within Cape Town, there are specific cities within Cape Town where there are specific locations within Cape Town where AWS now has their data centers located. So they won't put it in the same place in Cape Town, right? They will put it in a region A, in an availability zone A, availability zone B and C, such that if anything happens to one of the availability zones, there will always be another availability zone in that same Cape Town that can serve the customers. So this is very, very important. So when you look at geographical a region is a geographical location within a country. You can say London is a region, for example, and an availability zone is a building that has tens of thousands of servers, right, in specific locations within that London. We can have an availability zone in South London, another one in North London, another one in East London. So if anything happens to the availability zone in South London, the East London one can serve your customer. So each AWS region has 2 or more availability zones, and availability zones consist of a data center or a group of data centers. Very important foundations for you to know. Also, how do you determine what region you end up building your AWS and your application or whatever it is that you want to use on the cloud? There has to be a way that you select your region, right? Because we know that AWS has 38 regions globally, and they have so many availability zones. They have so many of all these things. So how do you make a decision? So there are 4 key things that you think about when you want to choose your AWS region, depending on what you want to build on the cloud. You can decide that, I want to build a website today, and I want my website to run fully on the cloud. So if you want your website to run on the cloud, you need to think about, okay, what region? Because you have to select a particular region where you're going to build that website. So what region? Or you have a web application like an Instagram, an idea that you want to start, or whatever product that you're trying to develop. You want to build it on the cloud. You want to leverage all these advantages. You have to make a decision as to what region. And there are 4 key things that you should think about when you want to select your AWS region. The first one is data sovereignty laws. Are there restrictions around where my data can reside? Are there any federal requirements? Well, now in an age where there's a lot of regulation around data, there could be for example, if you're dealing with financial services clients, which I've dealt with a lot in my career, most times financial services and government, they are usually the ones that always have restrictions around where data should reside. So a bank can say that, you know what, all UK data must stay in UK. So if you are building an application that involves UK people's data, right, and maybe it's related to financial services, you have to think of other regulations and restrictions around where this data can be. So you need to make sure that you're picking a data center that is in that particular region that you know, your customers are. You need to think of latency to end users as well, which is the second point on my top right. Where are most of my customers? Even if, for example, I'm based in China and I want to build an application for people in Australia, I won't say that because I'm based in China, let me now use China region to build my application. I need to think about where my customers are. So if my customers are in Australia, then I'm going to strongly consider putting my building servers in that Australia region. Bear in mind, we're not dealing with anything physical right now. You're just programming it on your cloud provider, which is so revolutionary, because before the world of cloud, you can't do that. You have a business in China, that means you have to now travel to Australia and go and set up your servers there just because you want to be close to your end users. Imagine the volume of cost that you're going to incur on your business just because you're doing that. But in the world of cloud, you're not sitting down in your room, in your computer, you log into your cloud provider and you say, you know what, even though you're in China, you're like, I want to build application for people in Australia, and all you do is select Australia region and you deploy your application there. As it is such a huge change in how things operate, you know, moving into the world of the cloud. So majority of your end users as the driver for where you put your AWS region. You also need to think of the AWS services you're dealing with. What region have what regions have your required services? You know, sometimes there are some services that are not available in some region. By the way, AWS has over 200 services, different services. We're going to look at one today after your break, right? You know, AWS has over 200 services. And there's no way you can learn it. Our plan is to lay the foundation for you, right? And as you continue your cloud journey, be getting introduced to all the services one after the other. You know, but so there's some services that are not available in some regions. So you have to consider that when you're building. And then pricing is also very important, because pricing varies from region to region. And AWS is very transparent. Even other cloud providers, they'll tell you this particular service you want to use, this is how much it costs, right? And those are the factors that you think about when you're deciding your AWS region. And then finally, we have something called edge locations. Some of you may have this question, right? An edge location is an endpoint that is used to cache or store content. So the summary of what edge locations are is that you've seen that AWS doesn't have a presence all around the world, right? But there are some scenarios where AWS has the opportunity to partner with some third parties, and let's say, for example, you've actually done all your research, you've done all your background work, and you make sure that you're living in China, you deployed an application for people that are majorly based in Australia. That means you selected Australia as your region, right, for building. And then all of a sudden, somebody in London wants to access your application. Your application because your application is being fed from a server, a cloud server in Australia. It's going to take a while for that information to move from Australia to London. So the whole idea of having edge locations, which global cloud providers have edge locations all around the world, the whole idea is that they have, points of presence. That's what we call it, mini servers in different parts of the world, where any data that has been accessed, somebody in London decides that they want to access your data that is present in Australia. Once that person accesses it, there's a mini server that will be right there in London where that information is then stored. So any other person in London that wants to access that information, they can easily access it from the London, server, as opposed to accessing it from Australia all the time. So that's what we mean by the file will get cached, right, in London, so that any other person that wants to access that file in London can access it. And, and it reduces what we call latency. Latency is the time that it takes for information to get to, whoever is requesting it over the internet. So there are all those mini servers all across the world, right? Some of them are just third party. It's not necessarily owned by AWS. So this is how AWS is able to manage many places that AWS doesn't have a full data center in. So altogether, we have AWS has about 38 regions across the globe. They have 120 availability zones. Remember, availability zones are data center regions. Each region has about 2 to 3 availability zones. So you have all those availability zones. So a London region, for example, can have 2 availability zones. A Sydney region can have like 3 availability zones, for example. So availability zones are within the region, and then edge locations are just points of presence, right? Just foot places where AWS still has a footprint, where we can actually use those edge locations to store. An edge location is a physical server location where AWS stores cached copy of your content closer to the users, right? Based on the analogy I just gave. Okay, so that's what I mean by AWS edge location. So we have edge locations all across the blue dot. So we now have edge locations all across, in addition to regions and availability zones that already exist. So that's the first part of our lecture today, just introducing into what I want to show you again, what I just explained. So this is the global infrastructure. You can see AWS Cloud spans 120 availability zones, 38 geographical region, and they have plans for 10 more availability zones and 3 more regions in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and all those other places. So if you come down here, if we go to North America again, and we look at Canada Central, you can see that there are 3 availability zones in Canada Central, and it was launched in 2016. Africa, for example, this one was, if I went to started teaching cloud, there was no presence at all in Africa. So you can see it was launched in 2020, the region in Cape Town, and then it has 3 availability zones. So you can see, so there are other places that they will tell you they're coming soon, right? So all across the different continents, you see that AWS has regions. So the regions they have altogether are 38 regions, and then we also have over 120 availability zones. And then for the edge locations as well, they are also all over. So imagine in South America that has South America has 2 regions. So you can see the 2 regions right here. And then even though they have just 2 regions, the edge location and they have 3 availability zones, they have over 77 edge locations, right? 7 edge network locations and 1 edge cache locations. So they have additional. So the edge location extends the areas that AWS actually has, can control and can store your data. So regions, availability zones, edge locations, very important concepts. And like I said, all these things are really, really foundational, right? These are things that begins to lay the foundation for how you build on the cloud, understanding how the cloud works. There's still a lot more. In your second lecture today, we'll actually look at one AWS service out of so many, right? And then we'll begin to look at how all these things become relevant. So yeah, any questions? I can see someone has a question. If you have other questions, if you don't want to speak, you can put the question in the chat box. You can put the question in the chat box. Okay, so Adamu, please go ahead with your question. Oh, I can see the hand raised, so okay. Does Adamu have a question? All right. Does anyone have a question? You can put it in the chat box. I can see someone's hand raised. Mahadi Adamu. Any questions? Do we have any questions about how the cloud works, the foundation that we have covered today? Any questions at all? Okay. Sorry, if you don't have any questions, just put no questions in the chat box. I want to be sure you can hear me. You can put no questions in the chat box. If you have a question, you can ask the question. Do we have any questions on what we've covered so far? Any questions? If you don't have any questions, still put no questions. None for now, no question. All right, cool. Okay, because we have to be sure we've covered. All right, cool. All right, so that's the introduction into the world of cloud computing. We will now have a very short break, and then we'll go into our second lecture for today. All right, Salima, over to you.